So you've definitely heard tons of ancient mysteries of the world, such as the creation of the pyramids or the lost city of Atlantis and so on and so forth. But I would bet that most of these ancient mysteries we cover in this video are going to be new to you. From things like ancient zombies all the way to forgotten gods, we've got a little bit of everything. So let's jump into it right now. We're going to start this thing off with ancient automatons. So to start with, we probably need to know, what are automatons? Automatons can be defined as mechanical objects that once they're set in motion, they continuously stay in motion. They do their own thing. In today's world, you might think of AI or robots because that's basically what it is. What you probably don't know is that these automatons go back all the way to 1000 BC in China. Now, this specific automaton was supposedly like a life-size human figurine of a mechanical object. He walked, he talked, and he flirted with women because why not? You know, if you got it like that, you got it like that. Naturally, the Chinese king at the time didn't like this, so he destroyed it, but anyway, that was that. Now, within the construction of this automaton was like the basic stuff. There was wood, leather, glue, all the stuff that was natural to have in mechanical objects of the time. But what you wouldn't expect to find is the artificial organs that were inside this thing. It said that it had like all of the organs, and that's why it walked and talked and did what it did. Now, obviously, this makes you think that it probably wasn't true and it was just a tall tale. It was ancient China after all, and they had nothing better to talk about, but you can think what you want to think. It probably wasn't real. Ancient Greece had its fair share of automatons, and a lot of them actually were real because they were like legitimately documented. Archytas was a Greek mathematician and mechanical engineer that dealt with these types of things, and he had some of these inventions of his own. It said that he made a mechanical dove that was made of like mechanical objects, counterweights, stuff like that, so that it would fly, and it did. Now, this one too may not have been real, but these next ones definitely were. The Antikythera mechanism is a device that was said could predict like stars movements and eclipses and stuff like that, and it was so advanced that they call it the world's first analog computer. It has 37 bronze gears so that it could, you know, do all this fancy stuff, and it was pretty awesome. Now, like I said, we know this thing is real because it was found in a shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera. As you would expect, the ancient Greeks weren't done yet. Hero of Alexandria was an ancient mathematician and inventor, also of Greek origin, kind of Hellenistic, either way. It said that he made over 10 of his own inventions, 10 automata. It said that he invented the Ellipoli, which I probably butchered the pronunciation of that, but anyway, it was basically the first steam engine. He created a water vending machine for some reason. He created a wind-powered organ, and he also created like float valves like you might see on livestock watering troughs that fill up with water, and once the water depletes, it fills up until the float fills back up. You can tell. I just realized that a lot of you probably don't deal with livestock, but you probably have like dogs or something, and they make automatic waterers for dogs as well. It's just a float valve that makes sure something stays full of water. We still use them to this day, so that's pretty awesome. The Arabic inventor Al-Jazari lived in the 12th century, and he created a bunch of like the traditional automata that you might think about, kind of robot style. He created a drink serving waitress that was an automata, and he also created a hand washing assistant, which why do you need that? I really don't know, but anyway, he made some more too. He made not one but two entire robot bands that played at like rich people get-togethers. Now, the stuff that he made was kind of unnecessary in my opinion, but it's pretty awesome. Like, imagine showing up to a party and there's a whole robot band sitting over there playing for some reason, and you've never even seen a robot before, so it's kind of just weird. Obviously, these things were shocking for the people back then, but the further we get in time, the more humanoid in nature and just normal these things get to us. Like, now we have robots and AI. It's pretty incredible that they had even what they had back in the day, but if you think about it, all technology has to lead back to somewhere, so we're just reaping the benefits of everything these people were creating all the way back then. The Gundestrup Cauldron. The Gundestrup Cauldron is a silver bowl that was found in Denmark in the year 1891 that was absolutely full, like panel to panel, of art and inscriptions and things like that. And I say panel to panel because it was made of little panels that they had to place back together. Now, the origin of the cauldron still remains a massive mystery to this day. If you look at the base of the bowl, you'll see a bull, 3 dogs, and a woman wielding a sword. Now, as I was saying, the round sides of the bowl were created in 7 little panels that just curve and then you solder them together. So it's not like a one-piece bowl like we tend to think of. It's in pieces, you know? It broke apart over time. Now, I said that it was made of 7 panels on the round side, but it was probably actually made of 8 because it's a little bit small. The 7 panels that were found on accident. Like, nobody knew they were there. They were found by some people harvesting the peat out of the swamps of Denmark. Anyway, the 7 plates that were found depict men with different animals, such as dragons and horned serpents, griffins, which are lions with bird heads, elephants, and other feline creatures. One panel shows a goddess surrounded by all types of creatures, and another panel shows gods and goddesses in all kinds of different activities. Now, this right here is why the origin is so such a mystery. The whole thing in craftsmanship screamed that the Thracian silversmiths were the ones who created this bowl. The techniques in silver molding and tin soldering were definitely of like Thracian metalworker origin, but the artwork depicts a bunch of Celtic mythology. Celtic helmets, war trumpets, and religious depictions make up the entirety of the artwork. As a matter of fact, this thing is so thorough with its depictions of the Celtic mythos that it's said that this thing kind of serves as like a Rosetta Stone for the ideology. Alright, so the most common theory about the origins of the bowl is this. Somewhere like Romania or Bulgaria, there were a bunch of Thracians and Celtics living in tandem with each other, like they live same towns or really nearby, and they traded with each other. Like the Thracians did this silversmithing for the Celtics in return for something else. We don't know what that was, but that's probably what happened. The two cultures were living in tandem with each other, and they combined to create this great bowl. Now, how this thing ended up in Denmark is a great question, because Denmark is pretty much as far north in Europe as you can get from places like Bulgaria and Romania, so, you know, we really don't know how it got there. The full story of the Gundestrup Cauldron will probably never be known to us, but we do know that its origins, the silversmithing and the art, and, you know, the culmination of everything that it took to create this thing and then somehow get it to Denmark makes for a great story for people like me to talk about on the internet. The Long Man of Wilmington. The Long Man is a massive figure of a man holding two staves, something like that. Anyway, it looks like it's carved into the side of a hill near Wilmington, England. Now, whenever I say this thing is massive, I do mean it. It's over 200 feet tall, and it has correct proportions when looking at it from afar or above. Now, it looks like it's carved into the size of the hill, but these days, restorationists actually have painted bricks around the outline of the man that they replace quite frequently and repaint different colors, stuff like that, just to keep the thing alive. Originally, this thing looked more like a shadow or an indentation of the grass, but the British people wanted to keep this thing alive. They don't want the grass to grow over it, and it just fade away, so you can't hate the restoration efforts that they've gone over. So who exactly were the people that originally indented this thing in the grass? Like, why is the Long Man actually there? Here's where the restoration causes problems. It's actually really hard to tell who did it because it's been so many years and so many times the thing's been redone. The earliest account that we have of the Long Man was 1710, and the guy that wrote about him said that he had like eyes, a beard, and tools. Obviously, he doesn't have this stuff anymore. He just has his two staves, so that much has changed at least. People originally thought that the Long Man originated in the Iron Age or even the Neolithic period, but it's literally impossible to actually date this thing because all the artifacts around it that have been dug up, they're artifacts from every single time period, because the British place, England, has been inhabited for so long that it's really impossible to tell. These days, the scientists think that it was probably from the early modern period, so like the 15 or 1600s, something like that. Still, more folks look at Roman coins and say that he looks a lot like the figures on those coins, so he's probably from the Roman era, but we really just don't know. Now, there's some weird stuff that goes on around the Long Man. There's pagan religions that have ceremonies and rituals around the base of him because they think he's something to do with their gods. I really don't know what that's about. Alright, so the Long Man's cool and all, but this makes him even cooler. I'll leave you with this folk story of Celtic origin. This story infers that he represents Lugus, who was one of the Celtic gods. Two giant brothers lived on the hills of ancient Sussex. They were jealous and they were violent, and they always argued about who had more land and who was more powerful. One day, as they were both looking out over their lands, one cow roamed from one brother's land to the other. They began fighting over the cow, and the brother that took care of the Wilmington area, which is where the Long Man is, got beat up badly. His brother threw him up in the air as a finishing move, and he landed splat back on the hill, and he laid there dead. The Wilmington villagers were saddened because this man protected them. He looked over their land and protected their animals and everything like that. So they traced his outline where his body was laying into the grass, and it said that the Long Man of Wilmington still looks over the people of the area to this day. Now, that doesn't really tell us anything about the Celtic god Lugus, but it kind of ties back to the fact that the people of the area probably originally outlined the Long Man and said that he represented Lugus, but then the folk story started about everything else. Stories like this will change perceptions of everything over the years, and there was a lot of years. Really quick, if you're not subscribed, please hit that sub button for me. It helps me out a ton. That's all I want to say. Let's get back to it. Darius the Mede. Darius the Mede refers to a character from the book of Daniel in the Bible that reigned over the Babylonians between the times of Belshazzar and Cyrus the Great, or about the same time. Well, that's what some people say that the book of Daniel is said to be saying, but in all actuality, the actual verbiage that Daniel uses says that he was made king over the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, not that he actually reigned over the Medes and the Persians. This will be important later. This will put Darius as a subordinate king under Cyrus the Great, which is important whenever we're looking at the validity of the book of Daniel. Here's the thing, there is zero historical context that says that there was a king between the times of Belshazzar and Cyrus the Great. If we believe that Daniel was telling the truth, then this would place Darius as the king under Cyrus Cyrus over part of the empire. If you want to know the truth about it, the book of Daniel is literally the only mention in all of history about this man named Darius the Mede. It does give a really detailed account of who he was as a person though. It says that he was the son of Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, you may know him as. Now this same Darius is the one that threw Daniel into the lion's den only for him to come out unscathed. Okay, so I've info dumped a lot here, but let's put together a cohesive thought about who this Darius guy was. So historians say that the book of Daniel was probably completely fictional because of this seeming error over the Darius the Mede character, but here's the counterpoints to that. First of all, after Cyrus the Great invaded and took over Babylon, he actually gave up leadership of the area to a man named Gubaru. This Gubaru ruled over the Babylonians, but he didn't rule over anything else. He was still under Cyrus the Great, as we were talking about earlier. That's what Darius the Mede was said to have done. It's entirely possible that Darius the Mede was just another name given to Gubaru. The name Darius actually translates to the royal one, so if you think about it, this could just be a title that was given to the person over the Babylonians. That's why Gubaru was known as Darius the Mede in the book of Daniel. Here's another option. Darius the Mede was just another title given to Cyrus the Great. This is the theory that I actually like the best. It kind of makes the most sense in my little brain. Darius the Mede was said to be 62 years old by Daniel whenever he conquered the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great was literally 62 when he conquered Babylon. Cyrus was also known as the King of the Medes, just like Darius. Supplemental texts of the Bible, like the Apocrypha, actually confirmed that Cyrus, not Darius, was the one who threw Daniel in the lion's den, so this would make perfect sense. I think that Darius the Mede was actually Cyrus the Great. Now, why Daniel referred to him as Darius the Mede, I really don't know. It was probably something to do with titles and politics of that time that we don't know anything about to this day. You gotta tell me what you think about this one down below in the comments, because I really don't know what to think about this. I don't know if Darius the Mede was Gubaru. I don't know if he was Cyrus the Great. Let me know what you think. Rongorongo. Remember those people that created over 1,000 Moai statues that have gone down in history to be the coolest thing since before sliced bread? The Easter Island heads are awesome, but these people actually created something else that's almost just as amazing. They created their very own writing system known as Rongorongo. This is a system of glyphs that contain human forms, animal forms, geometric shapes, and other stuff like that, but there's one problem with these things. We can't read them or decipher them at all. Also, on a side note here, these things date back to 1100 AD at the very earliest. They probably weren't created that long ago, but anyway, sliced bread wasn't invented until 1928, so I got you there. It literally was before sliced bread. Anyway, Rongorongo translates to recite, to declaim, and to chant out in the Rapa Nui language. Today, there's only 30 wooden tablets that remain that still have this script on them, so this explains why it's so hard for us to decipher these things. Legend has it that the legendary founders of the Rapa Nui civilization on Easter Island brought 67 wooden tablets with them from their homeland, and only 30 of them remain to this day for some reason. The problem with this is that the script was never found literally anywhere else, like Polynesia or South America, where these people were probably from. There's never any mention of these glyphs anywhere else. To make matters worse, literally everyone in the Rapa Nui civilization that was fluent in Rongorongo, by the time this thing was discovered by outsiders, was either dead or sold into slavery during the slaving raids that just destroyed the civilization. Here's the thing, Rongorongo was discovered in 1864 by a Frenchman named Eugene Irand. Back 100 years before that, the Spanish people annexed Easter Island and they forced the Rapa Nui people to sign and read their Spanish treaties. At this point, whenever they read and signed these treaties, there was literally no glyphs of Rongorongo at all. They didn't sign these things on these Spanish treaties. Now, thanks to radiocarbon dating, we can date back these wooden tablets. We can see when they came from, and it's very, very unlikely that any of them existed before the 1770 Spanish treaties were signed. So what does this mean? It's likely that the Rapa Nui leaders saw these Spanish words on the treaties, they saw the system of writing and everything like that. They decided they needed their own writing system, so they developed Rongorongo within this 100-year time span. This kind of thing has been done before, such as Sequoia's Cherokee alphabet that was created based on the English writing. It's highly unfortunate that Rongorongo died out within 100 years of its creation, but this is probably the most possible explanation of where it came from and how it happened. It's also highly unfortunate that literally nobody can decipher it, but it is what it is. The Black Sea Flood. The Black Sea Flood is a theory about the ancient floods that existed within basically all Mediterranean cultures of ancient times. Remember that guy Noah and his ark? Or maybe you remember Gilgamesh, or even the Hindu writings of the Great Flood. Well, this theory says that all of these events, all of these flood stories lead back to one event. 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, the last ice age ended and it flooded the Mediterranean Sea to the point that sea levels rose so high that they wiped out all of these ancient civilizations that were built in fertile crescents, fertile floodplains. As a result, all these people from these flooded lands fled their homelands, and they spread the story of the Great Flood to everyone around there. Alright, so obviously Noah's flood story goes as follows. He receives instructions from God to build an ark. He builds the ark and he brings his whole family and 2 of every animal onto the ark. They wait a year and then they go back to land and restart civilization because everybody else in the world died. The Black Sea flood theory says that the entire world did not flood, not everybody was wiped out, just the people in the Mediterranean. And just the people in the Mediterranean because the sea overflowed in the Bosporus Strait in Istanbul, Turkey. They said that it spilled over for at least 300 days and flooded 39,000 square miles. The 300 days of flooding would actually line up pretty well with Noah's story of flooding, but I'm not quite convinced yet. The counter argument to this theory is that there's no evidence, underwater or otherwise, that settlements in just this area were destroyed by the flood. Now, I won't tell y'all what to believe, that's up to y'all, but I do think that the whole earth, or at least the civilized parts of it, was flooded, and that was that. Every civilization was flooded and wiped out, and that's why we have no evidence of just the places in this area being wiped out. But like I said, I don't really know anything. I just talk about this stuff on the internet. These concepts are greater than my entire existence, so what do I really know? Vinca Symbols. Vinca symbols are an ancient set of symbols inscribed on clay tablets between the years of 5300 BC and 3500 BC. Some were found near Vinca, which is an archaeological site in Serbia, but there were others found in other Slavic countries like Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. The Vinca culture was a Stone Age civilization that thrived in agriculture, and they eventually learned how to use copper, so that's pretty neat. Now, as for their symbols, historians actually disagree about whether or not these things actually made up a system of writing. Now, like so many of these other scripts we've already talked about, these things cannot be deciphered because we don't know what language or if any language they were based on, so it's likely they will never be deciphered. Some people think it wasn't writing at all, it was just completely symbolic. Now, there are 5,421 symbols in the script, and they seem to basically all be pictorial in nature. There are pictograms such as animals, the sun, swastikas and crosses, and many, many more. Now, since so many pieces of pottery were found with these symbols on it, it's said that these people probably used these symbols to mark property as their own. They say some of these were probably used in religious ceremonies or rituals or vows, stuff like that. This would explain why so many of these pieces of pottery were found in basically trash areas buried. Once they were done with their ritual or their ceremony or whatever it was, they just tossed it. Generally, the consensus is that the Vinca symbols are just that. They probably didn't make up a special writing system, and that's okay. They didn't need a special writing system back in those days. These symbols served as all they needed during their lifetimes. Ancient Greek zombies. Alright, so the ancient Greeks had several strange beliefs and fascinations that have carried over into the modern day, and zombies are one of those. The Greeks believed in undead creatures called vrikolakas that ate flesh and for some reason really liked the taste of human livers. The lore of these things are very much like vampires, but the fact that they eat flesh and stuff like that makes them kind of more of a zombie category. So how are these things made or whatever? Well, they're originally dead people that did one of these things in life. They either lived a sacrilegious life, they were excommunicated, they were buried in unholy ground, or they ate the meat of a sheep that had been wounded by a wolf or a werewolf. Now, that last one is way too specific. I don't even know what was going on there. Now, the Greeks were so serious about this stuff that if they suspected that somebody that died had indulged in one of these activities while they were alive, they would literally do all in their power to stop the reanimation of them. They literally placed heavy rocks in the graves of these dead people to keep them from rising up out of their graves. This is crazy. They would place coins and figurines and vases and stuff like that inside the graves for good measure, just for good omens. So what exactly did the vrikolakas do besides just eat people? Well, they would leave their grave on every day but Saturday, which is gonna be important later. They would play ding dong ditch and call out the names of the people that lived in these houses, and if the people in these houses answered on the first time they called out their name, the people would die, and later they would be reanimated as vrikolakas themselves. They would also walk around, and since they're undead creatures, they were riddled with sickness, they would cause epidemics of sickness around the places they walked. Alright, so what was that thing about them not leaving their graves on Saturdays? Well, on Saturdays, they gotta get their beauty sleep. They're like the rest of the world. They'd stay in their graves to sleep. These Saturdays are the best time to exterminate them, which you absolutely want to do, because obviously the longer these things stay alive and eat flesh, then the stronger they're gonna get, right? So if you ever happen to come across a vrikolaka, here's what you can do. While they're asleep, you can impale them, burn them in their grave, behead them, or do basically anything else to kill a normal person because they're just normal people that reanimate. So that might be useful information for you if you're, an ancient Greek Hermes Trismegistus. This refers to the ancient syncretic figure from ancient Greece in the Hellenistic period known as Hermes Trismegistus. Now, he was basically just a combination of the Greek messenger god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Somewhere along the line, somebody decided that these two gods were equal, so they started being worshipped in the same temples. The combination of these two gods was referred to as Hermes Trismegistus, and he was said to have written the Hermetica, which you've probably definitely heard of that. Now, these writings became extremely popular. You know, the Hermetica, you've definitely heard of this. Anyway, hard sciences and philosophy. This was what he wrote about. Now, the science part of this included medicine, astrology, alchemy, and even magic. So you can imagine how unhinged some of this stuff actually was. Now, the philosophy side of it is probably more famous, and it deals with anthropology, which is the study of human nature, cosmology, which is the study of the nature of the universe, and also theology, because every good person talks about religion, right? Now, I've heard of Hermeticism as related to philosophy and stuff like that forever, but I had no idea that it actually traced back to Hermes Trismegistus. I've never even heard of this guy. Now, obviously, all these writings come from different authors. It wasn't actually Hermes Trismegistus because this person was not real. It was kind of like a pseudonym for all these different people writing stuff. Now, I'd like to point out that this Hermes Trismegistus was originally studied and worshipped in Egypt whenever they decided that Hermes and Thoth were the same entity. Trismegistus actually translates from Greek into thrice greatest, and this originated due to an Egyptian epithet for Thoth that called him great, that is, the greatest. And Hermes comes from the name Hermes, obviously. I'll leave you with some knowledge straight from the Hermetic texts. The punishment of desire is the agony of unfulfillment. In my small brain, this means that the more you want something, the more it's gonna hurt until you get it. My dumb old redneck advice is this: if something that you desire is truly out of reach, let it go, because the hurt and the pain from desiring it is more than it's worth. But if something is feasibly attainable, use the pain that this desire creates within you to fuel yourself until you attain that thing. This is how great people achieve their goals, and this is kind of what I'm doing with this YouTube channel. I'm not calling myself a great person, but I really want to do this, so I'm trying to be more consistent with it. Apply that to yourself and your own scenario, and there you go, you're a natural hermeticist. Mithras and Mithraism. Mithras was the Roman evolution of the ancient Iranian god Mithra, who was a key figure in Zoroastrianism. Now, Mithra was the god of light in ancient Persia, but after Alexander the Great conquered all of Persia, their gods kind of translated themselves over into the Hellenistic period in their religions. As such, Mithra eventually evolved into Mithras in the Roman mythology, and he served as more of a god of mystery. Now, since he was identified with mystery, he obviously had an entire cult dedicated to the worship of him, because that's just how these things work, right? This worship of him eventually became known as Mithraism, and it was actually like a key rival to Christianity in the early days of Christianity. Now, the Romans also think of Mithras as a sun god, a god of war, and a god of justice. As such, he had quite the following, and a lot of those were actually soldiers, because god of war, god of justice, stuff like that. Members of the cult had certain rituals they followed, such as handshakes, underground temple meetings, code phrases, stuff like that, but they also had advanced rituals such as a bull slaying routine for some reason. Now, this ritual was actually to commemorate Mithras' own experience of slaying a bull, and it was to stimulate fertility for all the land. Legend has it that when Mithras was born, he had a torch and a knife. For some reason, he rode a cosmic bull that gave life to all vegetation across the universe after he slayed it. Now, why he slayed it, I really don't know. Now, since these people believed that Mithras was real and this actually happened, they slayed their own bulls. They had rituals for this ceremony. Now, much like most cults and secret societies and stuff like that, these people actually had their own ranks within it, and it was called grades. That's how they were separated. They actually wore different masks during their meetings to show their different ranks and grades. And it was said that the higher rank or grade you got, the higher your soul got in heaven or in the stars, actually, after your death. I totally skipped over the whole underground temples thing earlier, but yeah, they had underground temples. They were called Mithraeum, and their sole purpose was for gathering places for these people to perform their rituals and killing bulls and stuff like that. Now, as I said, Mithraism was actually really popular among Roman soldiers and lower class individuals, but it actually drew some of the higher rank individuals as well. While it's not explicitly stated that these emperors were members of Mithraism, like of the actual society, the emperors Commodus, Septimus Severus, and Caracalla encouraged the religion heavily among the Roman soldiers. Mithras was the god of justice, and they wanted their soldiers to be firm in justice and serving the king, stuff like that, so they really did encourage it among them. So if it was so popular back in the day, what happened to it? Well, Christianity did. As Christianity began to gain steam, Mithraism began to die off. Christians denounced Mithraism as pagan rituals and stuff like that, so that really didn't help it at all either. When Emperor Constantine started winning battles under the cross, Mithraism basically died out. Mithra and later Mithras had a great run though. From ancient Persia all the way to the days of the Byzantine Empire was not too shabby. Now, as I said, Mithra originated in ancient Persia and played a crucial role in Zoroastrianism, so you have to check out the first Iceberg video in this series that covered Zoroastrianism. It's linked on screen. Please watch it. Please watch it now, please. Please. Peace.